Hello. In the Crown of Aragon 639 years ago, it was January 3rd, 1387. My name is Jonathan Seyfried. I'm a PhD candidate in history at the University of New Mexico. And this is The Historian's Notebook, a podcast about how history gets made. Season 1 is titled Multcara Companiona. We're looking at a document from each day of the first year of the reign of Joan I of Aragon and Violante de Bar. Let's begin today's document. All right, today's document is a letter from Joan to the officials that are in charge of the city of Barcelona. Something to keep in mind about the organization of the Crown of Aragon is that there's very, very powerful city councils, especially in the big cities like Barcelona and Valencia. And you have to really think about Barcelona like it's the New York City of the country. It's a financial center. It's wealthy. There's a lot of people who have a lot of power. The population is, relatively speaking, very large. And if you're going to go up against the people who control power in the city of Barcelona, you could get yourself into some trouble. And that is actually what happens later on in Joan's reign. But right now, I think at this point, Joan and the leaders of Barcelona are just mutually apprehensive. Joan does not have a good history with these town councils. He's never really gotten along with them. He just doesn't like politics. He likes the arts, and he likes being outside with the hunting dogs. He does not like all of the political machinations and power plays. He just wants to listen to troubadours all day. So, dealing with the town councils is something that pretty much is at the top of his list of things that he does not want to do. And Violante will actually step in. Like in later years, Violante really is the one who's the political entity. And so in between the two of them, she's and I think it happens pretty quickly, which is one of the big questions I have for this year's project, is to figure out, well, when does that start? I think it starts pretty soon. I think that Joan's illness has a lot to do with it, his sickliness. So this particular letter, I'm trying to figure out if we can see anything about his sickliness or his illness in it. He's letting the leaders of Barcelona know that he's on his way, that he has received their information because they are keeping him informed, just like his brother Martí is keeping him informed. So Joan has received the letter from the leaders of Barcelona about the grave condition of the king, which in this document the king is referred to as El Señor Rey, the Lord King. So Joan is saying to them, I've heard the news, I've heard it's bad, I am coming to Barcelona. That's the simple message of the letter. But there's a lot operating here that goes beyond just what's being stated. So, first of all, this letter appears on the middle of a page, and there's two other letters on that page. The letter to the Barcelona city leaders is dated the 3rd of January. The one above it that precedes it as entered in this register is dated January 15th. And then the one below it is dated January 4th. So something has happened in terms of the organization of the letters. Is it a usual, typical backlog of the Chancery staff, or is it indicating that there's some other kind of chaos happening? Keep in mind that Joan and Violante, they're both making arrangements to leave their home in Girona and move permanently to Barcelona. So that's got to be a massive undertaking that just everybody's figuring out what to take and how to pack and how to move. And the staff, the scribes of the Chancery, they're also in the middle of that process, and they have to go with them. Earlier in the podcast, I speculated that Violante had left Girona before Joan did. I don't think so. I'm changing my mind about that. I think they're still together at this moment on January 3rd. That will change for sure in the coming days. But what is known at this point about how these conditions are shifting? And I'm talking really, when I'm talking about conditions, I'm talking about Joan's health conditions. Because in this letter, he's saying, I'm going to be in Barcelona. I'm just going to be on a little rest in this place called Belladonna. Belladonna is just on the outskirts of Girona, and it is true that Joan makes it further. I have to kind of figure out when, but I have to go back and look at the itinerary from Daniel Girona y Llagostera to figure out when he leaves Belladonna and goes to Hostalric. Hostalric is not all that much further away from Girona, so he's not really making it to the halfway point between Girona and Barcelona. And then he moves on to another place called Granollers, and he's there for a while, and he's definitely in a state of illness in the middle of January. Violante and Joan, they finally enter Barcelona on January 19th. I should have said that Joan enters Barcelona on January 19th. The secondary literature is incredibly conflicting on what is going on in these days. Who is in which place when, and what is Joan's health condition on the different days. It is not very well laid out. There's a couple different historians that have gotten into this. They're pretty much basing their accounts on the book by Tasisi Marca, and that book doesn't have footnotes, so it's really hard to try to figure out when Joan's illness gets to its most severe point, and then when he starts to recover, and then when it gets worse again. So this is one of the things I'm going to be tracking as I'm going forward in the documents day by day. So what's happening in this particular document here is that Joan is saying all the nice things about, oh, it's so sad that my father has very bad illness and it's all very unfortunate. And then he says, keep me notified, keep the letters coming, and I am going to be there in Barcelona before you know it. I'm on my way. And that, of course, is a promise that he does not keep. Theoretically, he could have been in Barcelona by January 5th, because that's when Violante gets to Barcelona. So Joan gets pretty delayed. Something else that gets revealed in this letter that I think is super interesting from a logistical standpoint is that Joan says he has received a letter from the leadership of Barcelona that is dated January 2nd at the 3rd hour. So it's super specific. And it leads me to wonder a lot of things about the mail delivery. It was done by courier, and it seems clear to me that you can get a letter from Barcelona to Girona perhaps overnight, under 24 hours, but can it go faster? Kind of wondering about that. And then also, it's interesting that in these moments of intensity, intense frequency and communication, there's hours listed. There's like a timestamp hourly on the letter. So that to me is super interesting. I have not actually seen evidence of that before in my work in the archive, but I'm sure that it's been done and other people have seen plenty of it. But I think that's just super interesting to see for the first time in this document. So this document is attempting to maintain the appearance of stability for the upcoming succession. And it's doing this work to confirm that Joan is engaged, that there's not going to be any room for any shenanigans. And I think that's pretty important because we've already had something very weird happen, which is the current queen fleeing the capital and like fleeing the bedside of the king. And Martí, who's been there, Martí is also about to leave Barcelona in order to pursue the current queen, Sibylla. So there's a moment approaching when no one in the immediate royal family is going to be in Barcelona if Martí has followed Sibylla to where she's fled to. And so that, I think, is probably motivating the decision for Violante to head to Barcelona and to not be at Joan's bedside as he comes down with an illness. So that's how I'm currently thinking about the situation here, and we'll see if that develops as I get further into the documents. One close reading moment is something I'd like to flag at this point. In the second line, Joan uses the phrase los accidentes de la malattia del Signore. So basically talking about the accidents of the illness of the Signore. So I was kind of curious about that and the use of the word accident. And so I used an online resource that is available from the Institut d'Estudis Catalans, and I was able to find it's kind of like the Oxford English Dictionary but for Catalan, and I was able to find a really great entry that I've linked to on the webpage for this document, and it makes it really clear that the word accidents can refer to can basically be used like misfortune. And so here Joan is talking about the misfortune or the worsening misfortune of the illness of the Lord King. So I thought that was an interesting word choice. He uses it again a couple lines further down in the letter. Los dits accidents, the said accidents, the said misfortunes. He wants to be further notified about any other misfortunes that occur. I mean, we know what that means. That's when the king dies. So, all right. That's the material for today's letter that I was kind of most excited to talk about. And we will now bring this episode to a close. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Historian's Notebook, Season 1, Molt Cara Compagnona. If you still have questions about the way that the succession operates in this moment of one king's death and the new king on his way, if you have questions about mail delivery in the Middle Ages, if you have questions about the town council of Barcelona and who was on that, well, Yes, you are leaving with more questions than you arrived with, and I have done my job. The motto of the Historian's Notebook is, as we know, dissatisfaction guaranteed. But visit the website, jonathanseyfried.net, to see an image of today's document and additional show notes. And listen again tomorrow to hear about the next day in the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. In the meantime, take care.